It is 4 p.m. We're bringing developing news and the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon at the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories we're watching is Wednesday, November 6. Former President Donald Trump still leading the U.S. presidential elections with 266 electoral votes as of 3:20 p.m. Manila time. Remember, he only needs to get 270 votes or electoral votes. So 4 more to go, so to speak. Incumbent Vice President Kamala Harris has 194, malayo pa. 270 votes or electoral votes are needed to be elected the President of the U.S. In domestic news, the LTO identifies a company that owns an SUV with protocol plate number 7, earlier caught using the EDSA busway. The LTO confirmed that 52-year-old Angelito Edpan was driving the vehicle, supposedly, under the name of Orient Pacific Corporation. The company has apologized and vows to cooperate with the investigation. And Typhoon Mase remains slow-moving over the waters east of northern Cagayan. It is packing winds of 150 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 185 kph. Signal number 3 is up over northeastern portion of mainland Cagayan, while parts of Luzon are under signals number 2 and signal number 1. And of course, joining us today is Storycon's resident political pundit, ang bagyo ng politika sa Pilipinas, si Tito Ronald Llamas. And from the Philippine Star, ang bagyo ng Parañaque, si Editor-in-Chief Ami Pamintuan.
Hi, Ed, Ronald.
Good afternoon, Ami.
Mukhang klaro na kung sino mananalo.
Pulang-pula yung nasa likod mo. Pulang-pula yung nasa likod mo.
Pulang-pula yung nasa likod.
Sigurado na yan.
Oo. Well, 266 ha?
Pero sa Ed, blue yung...
Hindi, walang ganun naman. Ikaw talaga, bakit si Ami nakakulay pink ko?
Oo, anong kulay nun? Hindi pink to.
Hindi.
Yan, beige.
Mukhang pink eh. Kasi dito sa heat maps nila, pag pinkish ka, ibig sabihin likely to be Republican.
Red.
Hindi, red.
Wala akong naririnig na gano'n.
Hindi, sa mga heat maps, pag red kasi, pag full red, Republican na. Pero pag likely to be Republican, when the numbers are swinging in that direction,
pink.
They make it pink sa heat maps.
Ayan na yung mga swing vote.
Indicator
Napunta
lang.
lahat sa pula.
Lahat.
Ayan na.
As in, lahat.
Napunta sa pula lahat.
Okay.
Yung mga undecided, napunta lahat sa pula.
Yung mga inaasahang swing votes, swing states,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania ang pinakamalaki with 19 electoral votes. Nagpula na siya. Went to Trump. As well, Georgia with 16 electoral votes, napunta na kay Trump. North Carolina with 16 also, 16 votes, napunta kay Trump. So natitira lang are Michigan with 15, Wisconsin with 10, and Nevada over there, and Arizona with 6 and 11 respectively. May New Hampshire pa pero
even
konti
before
lang
the election, 4 dyan lamang si Trump. Before the election, sa swing states, 2 tied at 1 labang si Kamala. Even before the election. So even before the elections, medyo may slight lead na talaga si Trump dun sa 7 swing states, except 1.
Well, for those not familiar with the term swing states, explain to us what swing states, what a swing state is. It's kung saan, malitang margin lamang.
Yes.
It could swing either way.
Yes, nasa margin of error. Sabi nga nila, this is a margin of error election. No? Kaya, ayun.
Nabitin ako sa ayun mo. Okay.
Nag-decision na yung margin of error.
But some of the swing states before, in the earlier elections, parang they appear to be solid Republican or solid Democrat. Pero nagbabago-bago rin yung voting pattern.
Alam mo, Nevada, nagbago siya 6 times sa Republican, 6 times sa Democrats.
And yung what they used to call the blue belt, was that the blue belt?
Yes, the Great Lakes, the blue wall.
The blue wall.
The blue wall.
Rust Belt pa rin
yung industrial base ng US. Usually Democrats yan. Pero nagiging swing states nito mga nakarang election. At ngayon ay Trump.
Okay. Okay, Bok, let's bring in our business editor, si Regina Hing, who went to the election watch party sa US Embassy. Let's bring in Regina.
Yes.
Regina, what can you tell us about what happened dun sa sa affair where you went to?
Okay, yung mas mahalaga, ano yung pagkain dyan, Regina?
Wala na.
Ano pa, di hamburger.
No, the watch party's over. I moved on to another conference now, to Strat-based conference.
Okay.
And, initially, of course, everybody, the mood was really buoyant and the spirits were really high. But that was early on in the day, right? Right before they started calling the races, and especially way before they started calling the swing states. I would say, it drew a good mix of people in the business community, people that they're familiar with. There was a good representation from servicemen. PCG spokesman Commodore J. Tariela was also there because, of course, the whole Philippines defense strategy has been heavily, anchored on the United States this time around in this administration, right? So that's not a surprise. There was also a good representation from the diplomatic community. We also got to speak with Ambassador Mary Kay Carlson. Mm-hmm. And of course, again, this was hours ago, so way before, these numbers that you're talking about turned up. But of course, as to be expected, she was talking about how whichever way this goes, there's very strong bipartisan support for continued engagement in the Indo-Pacific. Those were her words, very strong bipartisan support. She says, look, it's really Congress who's pulling the purse strings anyways, and really Congress that's deciding on the financing for a lot of these defense and military, commitments, which is true. But then there's the question of, okay, well, looks like they're on track. The Republicans are on track to take both houses of Congress. So what then, right? So now they might have a supermajority. So that question remains a big one. But Ambassador Carlson's point was that, okay, well, nothing should change, which is something that you would expect an ambassador to say, right? Nothing would change in terms of the defense and commitments to the Indo-Pacific.
Well, career diplomats are always very careful about positioning or refusing to position themselves politically. Because they're career diplomats.
Kahit naman ano mangyari, they will still be career diplomats.
And even if you interview, for example, Babes Romualdez, the ambassador to the U.S., you can ask him all sorts of questions, but in the end, he will say he can work, or they can work, and we can work with whoever wins.
Pero totoo naman yun eh. We are treaty allies eh.
Yeah.
Ang sinabi ni Mary Kay Carlson, we will remain steadfast friends. Of course we will. And we've seen how it was when Donald Trump became president the first time. Talaga namang close pa rin yung Philippines and the US. And in fact, hindi ba meron ng controversy noon? That was the height of COVID. And through the Trump White House, magpapadala dapat dito, di ba, ng 10 million doses of Pfizer. Dapat tayo.
Right.
Tayo yung, meron tayong, mauunahin tayo, hindi ba?
Right.
Hindi nga lang natuloy, someone dropped the ball.
Mas ang
Diba?
concern
That was
lang.
a controversy doon. Pero dapat, by January, nung wala pa, hindi pa nire-release yung mga vaccine, dapat meron na. That was the Trump White House pa.
Yeah.
Diba?
Well, lagi namang inuulit nila, the MDT is ironclad. Mas ang issue,
Yes.
Ani, ay
Ironclad,
mag-i-increase ba yung kanilang support sa atin? Mas yun yung issue eh. Mag-i-increase ba with the Trump presidency? Hindi yung status quo lang. Halimbawa kasi nung campaign, ang sabi ni Trump, sa Taiwan, we will defend you, but you have to foot the bill. You have to pay. No, we will defend you. Ibig sabihin, ay magka-cut siya ng support sa Taiwan unless sila mismo yung magbabayad.
They
sa kanilang
shoulder
defense.
part of the expenses
Yes,
of the
yes.
security.
Dahil yun yung essence ng MAGA eh. Make America
Yes.
Great Again. Gamitin natin yung bulto ng ating resources dito sa ating loob sa bansa. Kaya yung Europe, delikado. Yung NATO,
Yes.
at saka yung Ukraine. Yun, definitely, ikakat yung suporta dyan. No? Kaya ang tanong, dito ba sa atin ay mag-i-scale up o status quo lang?
You guys made a great point. The Mutual Defense Treaty was signed under the first Trump presidency, and that was brought up here as well at the Strat-based Filipinas conference, right? So most of the delegates here are, I would say, hedging. Nobody wants to say anything definitive yet about the outcome of this election, even though we have a good idea where it's headed. But one interesting insight that I heard was somebody named Dr. Prashant Paramaswaran. And he says, look, on the defense side, that's probably going to be status quo. You're not going to, I mean, as far as the Philippines is concerned, right? The question really for Philippines, and I guess ASEAN to a certain extent, is the economic and trade side of things, because as we all know, he is quite transactional. And so the question always is going to be, what will the U.S. gain from this treaty or this agreement? And that question will be asked again of these alliances, is his point. So he says, on the defense side, I don't think you have anything to worry about, but it's on the economic side that is a bit uncertain at the moment.
For example, Trump has been quoted as saying that he may want to increase tariffs on some products from China by up to 60% and across the board by 10%. So that will, of course, that will have an impact on China, but it will also have an impact on us.
Yeah.
The impact will be more in the US. That will be inflationary.
Yes. Saka Reg, medyo malabo na yung FTA natin with the US, under a Trump presidency. That's what people are saying anyway.
It won't happen.
Yeah.
Ayun na, Secretary Ronald Llamas called it. But yun nga, I mean, look, again, it comes back to the core question at the heart of this all is, what will the U.S. gain from it, right? And if we're running a trade deficit against the U.S., and what else, I mean, what else do we have to give them? And if that question is unanswered, then yeah, most likely a free trade agreement is not going to happen in this administration, right? That's the essence of the MAGA ideology, right? What's in it for the U.S.? He wants to make it America first again. So that's something that I guess the authorities on this side of the world have to think about.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Maraming salamat, Regina Lay, our One News business editor, report to us live from the
Thank you, Reg.
seminar. Thank you, Reg. Meantime, another One News senior editor is also at large.
Large. Wanted ba? Wanted.
I don't know if that was deliberate, but it was bringing Joey Francisco, who reports to us live from Washington, D.C. What's the latest from your end, Joey? Oy, ano pala doon? What time is it there right now?
Madaling araw.
It's 3 a.m., no? 3:15.
Yeah.
Joey, I think you're muted, I think.
Mute.
There you go.
Yes,
Wala pang tulog si Joey.
Exactly 3:14 a.m., mga kapatid.
Yeah, 11 hours. Okay. Sige po.
Yeah.
Give us an idea.
Joey? Ano mo dyan ng mga tao?
Hindi na nga namin alam ang gagawin namin kanina kasi originally ang schedule namin, Ma'am Abby, ay pumunta doon sa Howard University dahil nga nagsabi doon talaga pupunta si Vice President Kamala Harris. Actually, nandun na siya at kumbaga maghihintay na lang kung ano man yung magiging speech niya. Pero hindi mo na tayo pumunta kasi maraming ginawang storya at reporting from dito sa DC mismo. Nung papunta na, nung first attempt namin, papunta na siya na kami na sinabi na parang madidelay because nga yung numbers medyo kailangan bantayan. So parang walang use na pumunta agad doon. So second attempt na, napupunta na kami, on the way na talaga, biglang sinabi naman na hindi na magsasalita at bukas sa lang magsasalita, pinaanunsyo doon sa stage. So hindi na rin kami tumuloy at nakita namin na nag-alisa na rin yung mga tao doon. At we even saw some of the students na bumalik na dito sa town proper.
Joey, let me just read a story from the BBC. Kamala was expected to spend election night at Howard University in Washington, where she was an undergrad, but it emerged after midnight that she would not attend. Following the announcement by campaign co-chairman Richmond, the crowd all but disappeared from Harris headquarters at the historically black college. At the same time, ang headline
Yes.
ng Kamala Harris, BBC, Kamala Harris cancels election night party as path to victory
That's
now.
true. That's true kasi ang original schedule talaga ay merong family dinner pero within the premises lang nung Howard University. Tapos ay pero may activities doon sa stage para doon sa mga student supporters niya. And after that nga ina-expect nila na merong grand speech sa kaduluduluan nun. Pero it didn't happen na talaga at nag-reschedule for tomorrow pero we don't know kung saan na yung venue nun. We'll just monitor it, Ed.
Let me ask Ronald, Joey, while you're still there, you might want to pitch in din. Ronald, look at the numbers, 219 versus 266, 270 yung target. May pag-asa pa ba si Harris?
Wala na.
Wala talaga.
Tapos na yan.
Wala na.
Goodbye Philippines na.
Dahil
Tapos na laban.
lahat ng swing states na nakikwa na yan. Especially Pennsylvania. Who gets
With
Pennsylvania?
19
Yeah.
electoral
So,
votes.
tapos na yan. It's just a matter of time bago i-announce. Kaya nga
Ang hinihintay na lang namin, Jovi, meron bang concession speech or whatever?
hinahanda na yun.
Well, yun ang iintay natin. I think inahanda na yun.
Inahanda na
At, kaya lang hindi na ginawa doon. Kasi even before, kahit na ganun yung bilang, yung pasok ng numbers kanina,
Yes.
celebratory yung mood doon sa Howard University. So parang ang weird na downer doon ay concession speech. So mukhang sa iba na lang yun gagawin. Dahil parang hindi wise doon mangyari yun. I think tama si Ma'am Ami, and yun na yun. Tapos na yung laban. Kasi kung tutusin, pumalit na ng stage si former
Nag-victory speeches
President former President Trump at kasama hindi lang yung kanyang family pati yung family nung kanyang vice presidential bet. Tapos nanonood din lahat ng mga sinasabing naging supporters niya para dito sa run na ito. Even Elon Musk ay nandoon din sa harapan.
Although Joby, si Trump, even if he was losing, he would still do that.
Yeah. Mas profound yung
Sa
tanong.
bagay.
Mas profound yung tanong ko, Joby. Bakit YMCA yung kanta?
Yung kanta niya.
Yun yung aking profound question. Bakit YMCA?
Maganda kasi yung tugtog. Maganda yung tugtog
Yun ba yun?
Beat na upbeat.
Ilang beses ko na rin tinanong yan sa mga tao pero sinasabi lang nila because it's danceable at mukhang yun yung pwede lang niyang
Yun naman
gawin.
pala eh.
Maganda yung
Danceable
beat
din naman ang...
Pero Jovi,
Gangnam
kapag
Gang
may
eh.
concession kasi, ibig sabihin, they will no longer challenge Kasi merong mga stories previously, di ba, bago in the run-up to the election, ang sinasabi, hindi lang naman si Trump ang pwedeng mag-challenge ng result, baka yung
Even the
kampo rin ng Democrats.
Democrats.
So,
The
kung magko-concession, ibig sabihin wala na, talagang tapos na boxing completely. Wala na.
Yes. We're waiting kasi kung well, aside, well expected na tahimik si Vice President Kamala Harris at saka yung katandem niya. Pero yung mga parang sinasabing mga surrogates ay parang hindi rin nagsasalita pa. And of course, yung mga words from yung mga leaders na nakapaligid sa kanya like former President Barack Obama, wala pa kahit sa social media. We're still waiting for that.
Joey, saglit lang. We'll just play back a portion of the
Mukmuk
Trump
pa yun.
victory speech. I think we have a copy of that. Bok, let's play it now.
Thank you very much. Wow. Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends on this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Okay, historic, quoting him.
Yeah. Job, marami ka ba nakuha mga kwan dyan? Mga memorabilia, poster, pins, ballpen. Yan yung maganda dyan eh, mga campaign paraphernalia.
May konti. Alam ko na magda-dive in pa tayo sa mga sinabi niya ng konti. Pero speaking of yung mga tugtog, usually we use music para para iusad yung moment. Ibig sabihin na nasa likod, nasa background na siya. Pero napapansin niyo kapag kay Trump, parang tinatapos yung mga tugtog. Feeling, alam mo, yung buong kanta talaga. Hintayin niya matapos yun before sa mag-next move.
Napapansin ni Joby. Okay. Okay. Maraming salamat. Pahingin na si Joby. At baka mamaya isasalang
tulog
ulit.
ka na.
Yeah, before ako magbabay sa inyong tatlo, Ma'am Abby, nakausap natin kanina si Ambassador Babes Romualdez dun sa Philippine Embassy. Of course, yung sinabi niya na yung usual na walang epekto, tuloy ang MDT. Tapos yung stronger, yung ties ng RP-USA, it will remain strong. Yung mga ganong statement. Pero nag-zero on kami ng konti told ka kung sakaling si Trump panalo, noong time na yung mga bandang alas 7 ng gabi. Kung si Trump ang mananalo. Yun na nga, parang he was trying to explain din kung ano yung pinag-usapan yun nila Reg kanina about China and yung Make America Great Again at saka yung trade ay na-discuss yun. Pero sinabi niya, as early as now, they're preparing how to reach out to sino man yung mananalo talaga. Kasi it's part of their job dito bilang mga tao ng embahada to do that.
Okay. Maraming salamat. Fabinal Francisco, ang ating One News Senior Editor mula po dyan sa Washington,
Salamat,
DC.
Job.
Tito Ronald, before
Thanks,
going to break,
Joby.
paliwanag mga sa amin, how did this happen? 2021, January 6, di ba? Parang tingin ng mga tao, nakapatay si Trump nito. Tapos, he had a conviction earlier this year.
Assassination
All these
attempt
things.
pa, diba?
Well, baka yun, that might have helped him pa nga eh.
Tingin ko ang pinakamalaki yung yung exit polls nila. Ang exit polls kasi sa US iba sa atin. Yung exit polls sa atin, sasabihin mo kung sino binoto mo. Ang exit poll sa US, sasabihin mo ano yung naging batayan mo sa pagboto mo.
Okay.
So, nagulat ako na 3/4 ng exit polls ay galit sa gobyerno. Ibig sabihin sa Biden government. Well, reflected din naman yon dahil si Biden ngayon ang pinakamababang approval rating of any president. No? Less than 40%. So, yun yung major na tumama. Inaasahan ko siguro mahigit 50% yung ayaw sa gobyerno o galit sa gobyerno. Pero 3/4, ang laki nun Ang laki nun, no? Tapos yung nakalagay pa doon, kung i-deconstruct mo yung 3/4 na yon, 35% ay bumoto sila dahil dun sa concern for American democracy. 31% ay dahil sa economy. 14%, medyo mataas, dahil sa reproductive health. At 11% sa immigration. Medyo mababa yung immigration.
Baba.
Oo.
So,
4%
ano
yung
malaki?
foreign
Malaki
policy.
is yung,
ang malaki yung state of American democracy.
And
Na,
yung
in a
FRP.
way, akala ko, initially, sa una mong tingin, parang pabor kay Kamala.
O, na parang,
Hindi pala. Pabor pala
muntik na
kay
niyang
Trump.
patuloy,
Na yung
oo.
pagtugis sa kanya, yung pagsampal ng kaso, ay parang naging pabor sa kanya. Na parang siya ay
Persecuted.
hinaharas, pine-persecute. No? Pero yung pinakamatindi, yung 3/4 na galit sa Biden government.
What
At
is,
hindi nakahiwalay si Kamala ron. Di ba? Hindi siya nakahiwalay doon.
as a vice president.
Kaya yung banat ni Trump sa kanya, Biden ka, Biden ka, Biden ka. Yun yung main attack ni Trump sa kanya.
So yung 3/4 niyan were driven by, number one, the questions over the future of American democracy.
Yes.
And number two,
Economy, yes. Tapos yung reproductive health, tapos
But it's
immigration.
40% and
Tapos
11%
immigration.
lang.
Nagulat ako na mababa yung immigration. Usually kasi
Yeah.
mataas yun.
Yeah. Okay, let's bring in two Phil community organizers who were very active in the U.S. presidential campaign from both sides. We have Gabriel Young, a Democrat and secretary of the Filipino Young Professionals, and John Jose, a Republican and founder and CEO of the American Tomorrow Project. Magandang umaga sa inyo. Tama ba? Umaga. Good morning.
Morning, early morning, yes.
Magandang umaga din
Hi,
po.
Gabe and
John
John.
Gabe, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
Okay. Well, the numbers are the numbers are already up on the board. But let me start off with this. Okay. Maybe Gabe, seeing the numbers how they are right now. Of course, it's not yet final, but how is it from your end? What are you looking? What are you looking at?
I'm going to respond and say, first and foremost, congrats to my good friend John Jose and the Republican Party for the red tsunami. It's not even a red wave. We Democrats love calling it a blue wave, but this time around, what we're seeing is a red wave. Former President Donald Trump is now president-elect. Even though it's 267, all he needed was 3 votes, and as we know it, Alaska has always voted red.
Yeah.
And so it is so easy to concede and to be honest and just congratulate the Republican Party for a race well won. And then additionally, in the Senate, it's 42-51. The Republicans have taken control of the Senate, and as right now for the House of Representatives and Congress, it's 173-192. And even for the governor races, a majority of America's governors are now Republicans. And so just across the board, what we're seeing is that it's a red tsunami, a red wave, and the Republicans have won and have just been really well organized. And so all I can say as a Democrat is that we have a lot to work on and we have a lot of lessons. And while I still hold the truth that, again, I still possess the same concerns as any other Democrat in this country would have, that made the messaging about it's the fight for American democracy and integrity, because we still uphold those beliefs, that 39 counts of criminal charges and January 6th, and it's so hard for that to erase for our minds. But as we're trying to make sure that we are looking forward and charting a new path forward, we have to first practice what we preach, be civil and constructive, and say congratulations again.
Mm-hmm. But Gabe, let me ask you first, what happened there? The presidency, the Senate, the Congress, and the governors, what happened there as far as the blues are concerned? What do you think are the lessons here?
What happened is the Democratic Party and the institution failed, and it failed miserably. And what I mean by that is tokenization, ignoring the issues that really matter to Americans and not meeting Americans where they're at, but instead pushing a narrative. And I'm going to start with that, for meeting Americans where they're at. And I'm not just talking about the different racial ethnic minorities, but as in previous segments where I was with John brought up great points. The economy is at the forefront. Immigration is at the forefront. Foreign policy is at the forefront. But the Democratic Party didn't necessarily address those topics well. Within inflation and the economy, all it said is inflation is a worldwide problem. We're at 2% up, and that's the lowest in the world. However, it doesn't address the current needs of what can the federal government do to address and make prices low immediately. With foreign policy, we're seeing wars in Ukraine and also in Gaza. And so unfortunately, a lot of young Democratic voters like myself, although I did vote, a lot of other Democratic voters ended up not voting as a show of resistance and as a sort of repeat to 2016 when they didn't like Hillary Clinton, but they didn't like Donald Trump. They ended up not voting or even voting third party, which hurt in the long run as well. And so all in all, the Democratic Party has failed. It's failed in representing its constituents, it's failed in representing its candidates, and overall it's failed in making sure that it is the party of the middle and working class. Whereas the Republican Party did a great job at coming off as that more authentic, boots on the ground type of party and really pushing the populist narrative that is the popular sentiment amongst major constituencies across America. So again, the Democratic Party has a lot to work on, especially in breaking down the elitism that has built it up, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a future for us.
I was surprised, Gabe, with the exit polls. I was expecting that majority of Americans are discontented with the government. But I was surprised with 3/4. 3/4 in the exit polls are discontented with government. So that's huge. That's huge. So that might have cost you the election.
Yeah. Can you bring in John? John, well, first of all, congratulations.
Yeah.
But we heard a while ago.
Congratulations, John.
Yeah, we heard a while
Thank you.
ago Trump saying, it's also a time to heal and all that. So moving forward, what do you see moving forward?
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk about, and thank you all again for having us. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. This is a great platform to educate and showcase to our Filipino-American viewers and the folks from back home of what it is happening here. I'd like to thank Gabe as well. It's been a great election cycle to chat with him and to discuss these points. He's a great young man that's going to be the future Democrats as well, so for the Filipino-Americans. So great to have us on. But in terms of the cycle and moving forward, we've got to acknowledge as well, Sir Arnold, I know you were surprised by that, exit poll results, but those are the top issues that we've been hammering in since the very beginning, that the political pundits and the pollsters have kind of ignored. These are the folks that are those low propensity voters that we've been targeting that felt left out by the Democratic Party. And that in part is part of the discontent that they have for the government, which is the administration of President Biden and Kamala Harris. And it also didn't help in the last week of the election that President Biden calls the supporters garbage. That really resonated when Kamala might have had the last week of momentum, but she just flipped it right back. And I think there's some discontent between the two camps there. And so we would want to thank President Biden for that support in the last week. But in terms of moving forward, as you can see from President Trump's speech here, you're seeing a much more mature and a much more like President Trump. He's been there and he's admitted through all these podcasts in the beginning, he didn't really know what he was doing. He didn't know how to govern. Now that with experience of governing in a much more successful and much more organized and disciplined team that he's got, and as you can see, I'm very optimistic of what we can bring into the cycle. And you can see, like, for the first time Republican president I've heard that has won the popular vote as well. Think about that. 2016, 2020, that never happened for President Trump. So he's really conveyed his message to majority of Americans across the country to see these, sweeping votes across the swing states as well. So we're really optimistic. As you can see, he was ready to get back to work. It's not about celebrating, about winning. He's ready to fix this country again.
But John, what happened to his
Donald
claims
Trump
last
talked
night
about healing.
that there's massive cheating in Philadelphia? That was last night. So it was.
So there's
was
been
that
issues.
part of a tactic?
Sir, because each individual states have different voting laws and election laws. Yeah. And if you would look at Bucks County and those surrounding areas, that did cause some concerns, not only for Republican voters, but also for Democratic voters. And now with the operation of the RNC that we previously didn't have to battle these legal lawsuits and to get ahead of them, we found ways into saying, hey, this is not right for the voters of Pennsylvania. When you've had about a year to fix your election laws and this is how you prepare for it and still have malfunctions, I'd have to blame the state and those local officials for not adhering those issues in the very beginning.
John, Donald Trump talked about healing. You think this is possible, considering that we are still waiting for his sentence on his conviction on the sexual offense? You think this is actually possible?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you would look at those cases, those are, a lot of pundits have talked about how those are irrelevant and how they've been set up to trip him up since the very beginning. These are the obstacles that he's been talking about, right? And so now, in terms of healing, he's focusing on fixing the problems of the country when it comes to the inflation and the economical stuff and sealing the southern border. I believe that is one of his top priorities in terms of doing that. So we'll see what he comes out with his transition plans. I know that, he's just been, it's not over yet. The certification is still going to happen. There's still races to be called in some parts of the country, in the states, or in the Senate and the House. So I'm looking forward to what they bring up towards the inauguration and the transition side. But I'm optimistic that when he comes up to the first few days of office, he's going to do what he said. And that's what he did in 2016 when he won as well.
But what happens to that case? Because we are expecting a sentencing. Can a president-elect, can a sitting president be sent to prison?
Or can he pardon himself?
No,
Yes, or
that's
can
not
he
gonna.
pardon himself?
He still has that presidential immunity once you become president-elect, and so that's going to have to be a discussion that's going to be for the lawyers. That and for us to do anything about it, it's more than anything than speculation.
But although that is an interesting question, I suppose the lawyers are going to have a field day with that question.
Yes.
I can see, I can see Gabe. Gabe, you were raising your hand.
Yeah,
Yes.
sort of as a response to that. For those who don't know, in the Philippines, another facet of this presidential immunity has came from the court case of U.S. v. Trump, and with that particular court case was talking about his actions during the January 6th insurrection, and if presidents, while sitting in office, can be tried or criminalized or be sued for actions that they've taken. However, and mind, the majority of the Supreme Court are justices appointed by President Trump. And I'm not alluding to that the Supreme Court is a political body in itself. That can be a separate argument. As John liked to put it, the lawyers can argue that. But more so that the Supreme Court decided that sitting presidents have presidential immunity. And particularly on the opposite ends, for the ones who are considered the more liberal justices like Associate Justice Sotomayor, this creates a slippery slope fallacy in the future too, though, where a sitting president can order SEAL Team 6, for example, to assassinate a candidate. And not saying in the hypothetical that that would happen, and I am sort of paraphrasing from the dissent, and for those who aren't familiar with the dissent, it's when a justice who isn't in the majority opinion provides their own 2 cents, and it's considered the minority opinion that doesn't get upheld in the law. This has provided the ability for President Trump to act and to be free of the previous criminal convictions that he was having because of that one particular ruling. So within any actions that he's taken in office, or whether in an action taken whenever he's moving out and about, because the Supreme Court didn't define what essentially is presidential actions, because it's not like once you go to bed, you're not president anymore, essentially. And so President Trump essentially has immunity from all cases, which, again, as us Democrats we really feared for the integrity of our democracy when a president who does have these convictions is elected. But then that goes to say, again, does that mean that every law that is created is good? Well, that is, again, something for lawyers and philosophers to decide. But at least for us at the ballots today, we've showed that no, that just because someone has a criminal conviction, it means that they can become president, even though it means that they can't get a job at McDonald's. For the record, criminal felons cannot get a job at McDonald's. Want to read that out there. So there's a huge dichotomy between these two examples that are being played out here.
John, one
Yes,
of
Bob.
the fundamentals of the American system, political system, is the system of checks and balance. But what will happen to that fundamental if the Republicans win Congress, win the Senate, and at least at present dominates the Supreme Court? So how will that play out, the system of checks and balance?
I mean, they're all separate individual things,
Yeah.
so they're not co-inspiring to do different things, right? I mean, the Supreme Court's its own individual body, so is the House and the Senate, and they have to organize. And the next steps is for the House to figure out their next set of leadership, and the same way for the Senate and how they're going to govern, right? But I do believe, I mean, that was the same way in terms of when Biden won in 2020 and had the trifecta as well. That gets him to fast forward his policies that he's been talking about and making sure those policies gets enacted right away. So in terms of getting things done, those are going to be the priorities of the next trifecta. Shall we keep the House? And of course, we flip the Senate and of course the White House now too. So there's going to be a different dichotomies of leadership between the three houses and the three bodies. If we keep the House, do we keep Speaker Johnson? More than likely, yes. And who's going to be the next leader of the Republican Senate as well? Are they going to be, is the Senate body going to pick somebody that's more towards Trump, or is it going to be somewhat more of a moderate Republican that can kind of gather people of like more like Mitch McConnell? Right. So those are the different things that they have to figure out first before they move forward. But to have the idea of all three bodies and the Supreme Court to be working against the Americans is, crazy. But I think it's going to help more in terms of working within the American system.
But John, I think to Ronald's point, Trump does seem to be a bit more on the adventurous side, at least by his policy declarations and his statements. So I suppose the question there would be, would the Republican Congress, both Senate and the House, be in a position to act as a check and balance just in case Trump does get more adventurous?
The people that's going to act on the check on balances now is going to be the minority. Just like the way when we were in the minority, we checked and balanced Joe Biden and his administration to the the difference was then that the Senate was split, and that got Kamala Harris to be the deciding factor and the deciding vote in a lot of these policies. So in terms of the checks and balances, that's why you got the minority. I'm sure that the minority speaker or minority leader Hakeem Jeffries is going to be on full speed ahead in terms of oversight when it comes to the next upcoming administration. They're going to find ways to be a thorn to the side of the admin, just like the way the Republicans did, and make a case for them in the midterms to take the House back or some of those Senate seats back, right? So that is the terms of in checks and balances, and those, I believe, in elections are the biggest checks and balances we have in this country. To
John, what can immigrants expect now? Immigrants to the U.S. and prospective immigrants, will President-elect Trump fully deliver on his campaign promise? It's a promise, right?
I believe that legal immigration is going to be something that he's going to push for even more now. He's always said he's never been against immigration. He just wants legal immigration. We want folks that are the best of the best, not somebody who are going to be the worst of the country that's going to be crossing over the border and find ways into the American people. American taxpayers are going to be the one that's going to be funding their bill. And so I think that's what was the crux of why the American people got really tired of this illegal immigration aspect, right? I don't think Americans are scared of immigrants or turned away from immigrants coming to the country. I think they're focused on legal immigration and not taking advantage of a border policy that's so loose that anybody can come in, and then the taxpayers are going to have to be footing up the bill when it comes to their welfare. So I think that's the biggest issue in terms of figuring out and making sure that those borders are closed. In terms of for Filipino Americans, I believe it's going to be a lot more strenuous in making sure that we have the right qualifications and the requirements to come to America, just as what Americans want to have a tighter border, right, and tighter policies to get the best of the different countries that come to the United States. In terms of our Filipino Americans, it's going to be an interesting thing on how he's going to roll out these policies. But when it comes to talk to mass deportation and all of those, the sentiment that he's always brought up was he's going to try to get rid of those most dangerous criminals in the very beginning that has abused the justice system and has committed tons of crime in American communities. That's the ones that he's going to get rid of in the beginning. And then how do you find ways into making sure that law and order is abided in terms of legal immigration? I'm sure that that's going to be coming down the pipeline as well. But I believe that the House, the Senate, they're going to give them the checks and balances of this upcoming administration as well. But that's the strength of the American democracy.
How about climate change, John? Because Donald Trump has been criticized as a climate change denier. Will that change when he is now president?
I think, he's been pushing forward lots of climate policies, and specifically into making sure that America stands on its own in terms of the energy independence, right? He's talking about drill, baby, drill, and making sure that we depend on us instead of different countries when it comes to our oil production, and making sure that it's safer for what we are in the country. So I'm expecting, like during his presidency, he's reserved a lot of lands as well and make them federal lands. And so those are going to be policies. I'm going to be interested on who he puts in these cabinet spots, right? And that's a better way to kind of have a better internal analysis or a scope of what that administration or that agency might look like.
Mm-hmm. Gabe, you started by congratulating John over here. So I'm kind of also wondering if you've heard any news from your colleagues and from officials in the Democratic Party on what Kamala Harris plans to do. Is she preparing, for example, a concession speech already? In other words, has she conceded, whether officially or not officially?
So I can't speak upon my former colleagues and current colleagues in the Democratic Party in the Harris-Walz campaign, especially since I'm not over there in Wilmington, so really don't know what they're up to right now. But at least the short joke that I was texting with my friends is, hey, at least you finally got to go home. Please take care of yourself. Please get a good night's sleep. We were really up late watching it all the way till 3 a.m. And as much, again, it's comedic and laughing too. My friends haven't slept in the past 48 hours because it's really been that tight of a razor race. And so in terms of Vice President Harris and what speculation can we bring, as we heard tonight over at Howard University, Vice President Harris didn't come out and address the large crowd that was waiting for her. And a lot of what the commentary is coming from, correct me if I'm wrong, John, with my presidential history, but there hasn't been a presidential candidate in a very long time, whether victorious or defeated, that didn't address their in-person supporters on election night. And for me, it is such a stark contrast because there was so much hope and joy attached to the election. And now all that hope and joy is quickly dissipating in a quick flash when we need it the most. And our leader is not showing, which is really portraying a really bad picture, in all honesty, onto us Democrats. And so in terms of how I am hoping and looking forward, I really hope that tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon or whenever Vice President Harris is ready, that she eventually addresses us as her supporters. And of course, similar to what happened over in 2000 with Al Gore and George Bush, encourage us to create a new way forward and to create a stronger civility even though we didn't get what we wanted. I know President Biden tried that in 2020, but of course tensions were very high, and then even in 2016 because of the tensions between the nominee Clinton and of course President Trump. But I recall back into 2000 because it's one of the first times with the Supreme Court intervening and a lot of people losing their faith in the election process, that we had candidates who civilly shook hands and said and encouraged their supporters to accept the election. And so that is really my hope and how I'm hoping that a new constructive way forward through unity can really happen. And just wanting to make sure John and the Republican Party is being held accountable as well, that the Republican Party works towards that unity instead of the divisive language that we've heard before. A lot of the fears that we have, for example, is the fear of losing minority business development agencies or agencies focused on minority development, or even policies that are really protecting a lot of people of color. And so if the Republican Party is really calling for this sense of unity, then we hope to hold them accountable to that same sense through the checks and balances of the House, Senate, Judiciary, and eventually Executive.
Okay. I'd like to say maraming salamat sa inyong dalawa, Gabe Young and John Jose. Both young leaders from different sides of the political fence, but I understand also both very good friends, which is the way it should be. So maraming salamat sa inyong dalawa.
you.
And congratulations for peaceful elections. Wish us luck because next year we will have our own elections here.
Can't wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, good luck sa amin. Okay.
Thank
Maraming
you.
salamat sa inyong dalawa. Maraming salamat for joining Storycon today. Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star, and Tito Ronald Llamas, our resident political typhoon. Okay po. Maraming salamat sa inyo. Just again tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the Storycon. I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.